Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Theorizes. And do we have a wonderful theory today? It is, in fact, my favorite kind of theory, a Schrodinger's theory. At, at the time of the creation of this video, the second season has yet to drop. So the theory may or may not be confirmed, leaving it in that wonderful state of the box is still closed, we don't know if the vial has been broken. Until the next episode drop, the theory is both true and untrue. The theory sounds absolutely absurd on the surface, but when you look below the surface, there is quite a few points to support it. The theory fits the tone and flow of glitch text perfectly, but will take in a wild new plot twist if it is true. Now, there will be massive spoilers for Season 1, so leave now if you don't want to dig deep and examine every facet of the reasoning for my new pet theory. Go! Shoot! Shoot! So, anywho, spoilers ahoy. Who is Hector Knives' mysterious father? Who is Knives Jr., son of Papi Knives and Abuela Knives? Who is he and where is he? So, here is the theory. Alpha is Five's missing father. Sound crazy? Yes, it does. But there's actually a wealth of evidence to support this crazy theory. So, without further ado, let's jump in and see what evidence we can dig up. There is a general consensus in the fandom that Fives is an orphan. The consensus is and was so general, in fact, that I didn't question it until I started watching this episode, and discovered that there is no direct reference to Fives' orphan status in the show. Hector Knives' father is mentioned several times, with his actions being described in the past tense. His mother is never mentioned. He works in the food truck with his abuela and papi Knives and spends most of his time there. They talk about taking care of him in a way that suggests that they are his primary care providers. All that adds up to a heaping helping of animated orphan. However, for all of that, it is never outright stated that either of his parents is either dead or even missing. It is just a blank canvas of negative information. We have never seen Knives of the second generation. We've never heard Fives compare his mom to Miko's when Miko was ranting about hers. Moreover, this show has a track record of hiding plot twists behind our expectations of tropes. We expect an animated orphan, so we see one. But is he? For all of the theorizing and the clues, it is fairly safe to say Fives is living with his grandparents. The very deliberate parent-shaped blank spots in the glitch tech canvas are very well developed by episode 9, and it would be a massive disappointment if Madre and Padre just walked onto screen one day with a brown bag lunch for Fives. Before we go on, here are a couple of very interesting facts from the show that support the animated orphan theory, but are a bit too vague to stand alone and are only really relevant within an existing theory. Fives is constantly written with exactly the kind of mental trauma that a boy has when he traumatically loses his father at a young age. The contrast of his intense sense of responsibility, coupled with his undeniable competence, and his tendency to panic if he loses control of a situation, coupled with his low self-esteem, are classic psychological symptoms of paternal abandonment. They are not glaringly obvious, because he does have his papi Knives there to take up the slack, but the mental scarring is still there. This tendency is nearly universal in social animals, from barnyard chickens to African elephants. If you remove the adult males, the juvenile males go a little screwy. Secondly, and nearly as important, is Fives' hero worship of Mitch. If you take the father out of the equation, young men latch onto a role model in the media and form what the psychologists like to call a parasocial relationship with them. If the timeline we suspect is correct, and Fives' father disappeared 2 years ago just as Five was becoming a teenager and Mitch was rising to prominence in Fives' social world, it is only logical that Fives latched onto him as a replacement, explaining why Fives was so traumatized when Mitch turned against him, and why he was so willing to forgive Mitch after that fact. Thirdly, we have all been assuming that Fives' father is Knives Sr., i.e. his name is Knives as well. However, Miko has a very Japanese name and seems to have gotten in a matrilineal way from her mother. It is strongly suggested that Abuela Knives is Japanese as well. So it's possible that Fives' father has a different surname and Fives got his surnames from his mother. The corollary of this little oddity, of course, is that we don't know if Papi and Abuela are his maternal or his paternal grandparents. Probably not relevant to the main plot, but it really serves to point out how the writers have us guessing and doubting everything we assume, no matter how many old tropes they throw into the bucket. So, we now have the probably an orphan Hector Knives, known to his friends and enemies as Fives. What about this situation would make me assume that the companion pet robot Alpha is his missing father? Primarily because this show draws heavily on the old stories for inspiration, and Fives literally rescued Alpha from the underworld. Ostensibly, the episode Adventures in Pet Training was about Miko, but Fives got nearly equal amounts of screen time for his story arc in there. Now, Miko took the traditional route and rescued the figurative spirit of her mother by taking responsibility and learning to provide what her pet needed, just as her mother had taught her. Fives had a far more literal rescue mission. Alpha, by all appearances, had been trapped in that cave in the underworld for years. He was covered in rust, while the other robots weren't. The mini-boss bot had stolen his bolt and built a religion around it. Alpha had been trying to escape on his own for some time. Alpha had escape plans already in motion when Fives showed up, but was unable to enact them on his own. And Fives' ignorance was really emphasized in that episode. He knew that he needed to go up, but he didn't know how to go up. He had to listen to Alpha and follow Alpha's lead to escape the underworld. The point being that Fives didn't understand what was going on. Now, how do we know this is the underworld? First of all, it was down and out was up. The show really belabored that point, to the point of it getting old even within a cartoon. There is the theme of fire and caves, of magma, of the near demonic entities reaching up from below to drag our heroes down further into the flames. There were the little robotic imps tormenting the trapped Alpha. This simulation was coded pretty explicitly to look like the underworld. Then there is a whole other trope of storytelling. This one shows up in many European and Celtic folk tales. A pet or companion animal, one who was usually magic and could talk, turns out to be the enchanted princess, the king, the father, etc. The hero is looking for the entire time. Oddly enough, given the level of beheading that goes on in Adventures in Pet Training, one of the primary ways for the hero in this classic fairy tale to break the curse and free their loved one was for the hero to chop off the head of the animal. The curse usually goes something like this: "You won't be free until you can find someone who both loves you and will trust you enough to chop off your head." Kind of looking at Alpha's big old globe there. Then, on a more practical note, we must ask, how did Knives Sr. get trapped there? And where was there? From the evidence in the episode Smashosaurs, we see that Knives Sr. has a Hinobi sticker on the back of his car. Fives said his dad is taking him to work that night. The layered oddity of the situation, a child going to work with his father, going at night, then forgetting about his appointment with his best friend for 2 years immediately after, really calls attention to this brief scene. This suggests that Knives Sr. worked at Hinobi and something went horribly wrong that night, leaving Fives with a hard mental reset. This handily gets Knives Sr. in the Hinobi store. From the Hinobi store, Knives Sr. would have to get trapped in the simulation in the form of an alpha mech. Now here's where things get interesting. For this to happen, we would have to see that the Hinobi techs can affect human bodies and brains, as well as evidence that human bodies can be altered to look like mechanical forms. We would have to see that human bodies can be completely digitized. We would have to see that the human bodies can escape from this digitization. We see all of this in the first 9 episodes of Glitch Techs. In Smashosaurs, we see first Fives' friend physically altered to a game form by the mapping glitch. Then Fives himself uses his gauntlet to armor up into a mechanical dinosaur form. Meanwhile, Mitch tells Miko that she's broadcasting kittens onto the backs of his eyes, i.e. directly onto his brain. That he can't escape the effects of a Hinobi gauntlet tech even in the confines of his own mind. We see the gauntlets control human behavior again and again from the very first episode. In fact, the very first episode opened with Mitch's gauntlet rearranging reality by all appearances. Now, a human body being completely digitized or pixelated, as they might say in the show, and brought back is a bit harder to pin down, but there is evidence for it. When the pet trainer deliberately glitched her simulation, both Fives and Miko had their faces exposed so we could see their skin. When the cascade of green pixels passed over them, not only did their uniforms, pets, and gauntlets glitch, their faces glitched it well at a slightly different time than everything else. This happened 3 times, and their faces glitched twice separately from the rest of the world around them. This strongly suggests that in that situation, their physical bodies were pixel constructs. Now, Miko and Fives were sent into the simulation with those portal guns. That was visually impressive, very nice to have in a laboratory, but why were 2 specialized guns needed when the gauntlets had been shown to be just as effective? How often does a pet trainer need to send physical objects into the simulator this way? Is it a specialized function that pixelates humans? However that may be, it shows that Hinobi has the tech to physically drop humans into a digital environment. Moving on, we know that humans' appearances can be mapped over in the real world. In Castle Crawl, we saw that a human in a simulation can have their mental state forcibly altered, as shown by all the glitch techs trapped sleeping as statues. We have seen that humans can retain altered appearance outside of the simulation, as shown by Lexi wearing the dojo belt outside of the simulation karate trainer, and then by powering up to the armored fighter to face the rooster frog creature. So, physically at least, it is entirely possible that Fives' father was pixelated by those portal guns, trapped in a simulation, and has been limping around that literal underworld in the shape of Alpha Mech for the past 2 years. It is even possible that Fives literally went down to the underworld to rescue his father, in the same way that Miko figuratively went down to the underworld to rescue her mother. Now, let's look at some of the more obscure hints that the show has dropped. First, and circling back to the idea that this show is drawing heavily on old themes, is the name Alpha. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. It means first when making an ordered list. It also refers to the origin of life. In a wolf pack, the alpha male is the father of all the younger wolves in the pack. It is very interesting that Fives didn't give the mech the name Alpha. He simply saw what was already in existence and confirmed that the mech claimed to be the Alpha. Let's really take a look at the pet trainer who sent Fives into the underworld simulation now. Emma Devereaux. First of all, Phil never actually said there was a person back there. He never referred to her or interacts with her as a person. In fact, Phil seems pretty skivved out by her, and Phil has seen a lot. What he says to Fives and Miko is that, we have a pet trainer back here, and you are in good hands. Every other time he's abandoned them in one of those back rooms, it's been with an artificial intelligence, BIT or the Hinobi H training simulation. When Five calls Allie just an artificial intelligence, Devereaux seems notably offended and tells him that there is nothing artificial about intelligence. Now, in this kind of series, the trope is that this usually means that robots are people too, and don't be discriminatory against them. But this show has been expertly using our expectation of tropes to cloak their plot twists from the get-go. What if this means that there is nothing artificial about Hinobi's AIs? What we have seen is that Hinobi can alter and manipulate human minds. What if they can copy them too? What if they can't copy but can use them? More on that in another video. Now, look at how Devereaux spoke to Fives. She outright said that it was a problem he didn't have a pet, then forced him into a situation against his will where he would end up bonding with Alpha. First, that's awful judgy there, Devereaux. Not everybody needs or wants pets. Granted, I can't understand that mindset, but some people don't. And who knows that forcing a pet on someone who doesn't want one is a bad idea better than a pet trainer. Cesar Millan would never have forced someone to get a dog, or would never even urge someone to get a dog if they weren't already sure they wanted one. The very creepy Emma Devereaux was determined for Fives to have not just any alpha mech, but that alpha mech specifically. However, we are so used to the trope of the weird scientist that we don't question the peculiar type of her oddity. What could possibly have been her motivation for forcing that on Fives, unless she knew that that was more than just an alpha mech? So far, we have been coming at this theory as if the oddly small city of Bailey and its inhabitants are a physical place and a physical people. However, there is also the running Matrix-like theme of the show. If Knives Sr., or at least his presence in the game, was only a projection of pixels to begin with, then we can just ignore the whole challenge of finding him digitized and stored in the Hinobi servers. If everyone in Bailey is already in the server, we don't need to worry about that. Remember what a big deal Miko made about finding a comfortable place to be trapped sleeping forever. What if they are all curled up in a fetal position in tubes just like we saw in the background of the pet trainer's labs? And recall again that odd line of Mitch's where he called Five's friend who had been mapped over by a glitch a friend-shaped container, and how the pet trainer Emma Devereaux called Miko a humanoid. There is no guarantee that Knives Sr. was ever a full human body to digitize in the first place. So, here we have the theory. Knives Sr. is either a glitch tech at the Bailey Hinobi store or a game developer there. Either there was an accident or possibly Knives Sr. rebelled against corporate and was captured. Either way, he ended up in the system. His body was pixelated and imprisoned in the Hinobi laboratories. During the process, either something went wrong or he was deliberately mapped over with an alpha mech as part of the imprisonment. Emma Devereaux was either his friend or his creation and arranged to get him out of storage when Fives showed up. Perhaps she even mapped the alpha mech over Knives Sr. to smuggle him out of the underworld. What do you think? What could Hinobi want with keeping humans in pixelated digital storage space? I do have an answer, but that is a theory for another video, as this video is already running long. So what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Leave a like if you agree with my theory, or leave a comment blasting my theory like a glitch if you disagree. Check out the links below for some cool merch at Teespring, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.